This episode of Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Inside the Breakthrough, a new history of science podcast full of did you know stuff like, does snake oil actually contain snakes? If you're intrigued by science, get excited about the process of discovery, and want to have the best stories at your next dinner party, Inside the Breakthrough is the show for you.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
Welcome to a classic episode of the show where we take a look back at stories of connection that you may have missed the first time around. I'm your host, Stacey Simms, and of course the emphasis is still on educating and inspiring people with diabetes with a focus on those who use insulin. This time around, you're going to hear from the legendary Major League Baseball player Sam Fuld, diagnosed with type 1 at age 10. I first spoke to Sam in 2016 when he was playing with the Oakland A's. He retired as a player in 2017, and he was just recently named the general manager of the Philadelphia Phillies. If you're not familiar with Sam Fuld, I say legendary because, and you'll hear us talk about this, there was a time when he was known for these incredible plays in the outfield where he would just throw his body into walls. He would make these dives that, to me, the mom, looked painful. And I've linked up one of the many videos made by fans. You can check that out in Diabetes Connections, the group on Facebook. But Sam is a lot more than the legend. He also has a terrific program, a coaching program for kids with type 1. I will let him tell you more about that, but I will link up the information in the show notes, and I will talk about that after the interview as well, because, of course, in 2021, it looks a little bit different. Please remember this podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. This episode of Diabetes Connections is supported by Inside the Breakthrough, a new history of science podcast. 2021 is the 100th anniversary, as most of you know, of the discovery of insulin. It is arguably the biggest scientific discovery in Canadian history. This series examines that moment and many others through the lens of Canadian researchers trying to find what's next for the fight against diabetes. The host, Dan Riskin, has a great following. You may know him from many years of hosting primetime Discovery Channel shows. He's also really funny. He's appeared on a lot of late night shows, and he wrote the book, Mother Nature is Trying to Kill You. We've got a link to Inside the Breakthrough over at diabetes-connections.com. And of course, you can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. When I'm doing these classic episodes, I am reaching back to the people featured in them for a comment, an update, to let them know that we're bringing the interviews back out and see if there's anything they can add. And Sam Fuld was kind enough to correspond with me. And I did send him congratulations on the amazing new job as general manager for the Phillies. And I asked him if he could give us a diabetes update. So here is what he said, quote, "Hey, Stacey, I am really enjoying my new role. I am trying to learn and achieve as much as possible as we enter spring training. I'm surrounded by a lot of experienced coworkers and have been leaning on them extensively throughout the past few weeks." He goes on to say, "Time is precious these days, so I'm really grateful for my Dexcom G6. Next up is a transition away from insulin pens and toward an insulin pump. I'm really excited about experimenting with one of the hybrid closed-loop systems." So that's the update from Sam. As you'll hear in the interview, he was not using an insulin pump. And of course, I told him he can just jump in Diabetes Connections, the Facebook group, and learn more from all of you. So we'll see if he pops up. All right, here's my interview from February 2016. All right, my guest today is Sam Fuld. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 10 after he'd already made up his mind to play professional baseball. As you likely know, he got there, playing first with the Cubs, then at Tampa Bay, and now with the Oakland A's. It was while in Tampa that Sam started his weekend camp for kids with diabetes, teaching them, as he's learned, that diabetes shouldn't hold you back. As a mom of a kid who plays baseball and has type 1 diabetes, I'm really excited to talk to you. Sam Fuld, welcome to Diabetes Connections.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Can we start kind of by going back? Before you were even diagnosed, you were really into baseball, is what I've read. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Baseball was, I really can't remember a time where I didn't love baseball. I was probably 4 or 5 years old when I realized, oh man, this is my favorite sport. I mean, I played every sport imaginable growing up, but there was something about baseball that I just really loved. And I think I was better at it too than the other sports. I was okay at the other ones, but for some reason I was better at baseball. I think that probably helped contribute to my passion for it. But I think it worked hand in hand. I was good at it because I loved it, and I loved it even more because I was good at it.
So not too many years later then, you found out you had type 1 diabetes. What happened? Do you remember your diagnosis?
Vaguely. I mean, luckily it wasn't anything too scary. I mean, it was essentially an accumulation of a couple months of symptoms, and there's no type 1 diabetes in my family at all. So my parents didn't really know what was going on. They just knew something was going on. And I showed all the classic symptoms of going to the bathroom all the time and being thirsty and losing weight. I was 10 years old and lost 10 pounds over the summer. So my parents didn't take them too long to figure out something was wrong. So I think I remember going into the doctor, and I was about 480, which obviously is pretty high, but certainly not really high when you compare it to some of the other numbers that diagnosed diabetics get. So it wasn't anything too scary, luckily, and we all knew right away what the deal was. Well,
what was the deal? I mean, how did it change your life? This was, I'll call it a generation ago, let's say, your diagnosis, right? Like 20 years ago. So how did it change your life? This wasn't a time when people were automatically going on an insulin pump and getting a Dexcom.
No, not at all. No, I don't even think pumps were on the market at that point. It was certainly not an option. And yeah, I just remember, so I was at an age where I could be pretty independent with it. So I remember my parents helped me out with my injections for the first few months after being diagnosed. But shortly thereafter, I was really independent, and I had the old school syringe and the vials, and my meter. I think it probably was like a 25-second countdown, which is an eternity nowadays. But it wasn't too bad, and it wasn't like reading the color of a urine sample.
Right, nobody was sharpening the needles at night in the kitchen.
Yeah, so somewhere in between like ancient diabetes and current diabetes treatment. I was so naive. I didn't know I had no, I think my uncle had a cat with diabetes, and that was about all I knew about diabetes. So I really, in some ways, was naive and a little ignorant, and I just thought, okay, I figured it was kind of like having asthma. Like I had asthma at the time, and I was like, okay, I guess it's another thing to deal with. And I guess that naivete kind of helped me in some ways.
Yeah, well, it's good to not know what you can't do. Did you ever think you couldn't play baseball?
No. I was lucky. I mean, the medical staff was really positive and supportive, and my family and friends were really supportive. So it never crossed my mind that it would hold me back. I think I was lucky to be surrounded by some really supportive people. And, I think it wasn't until months or years after I was diagnosed that I heard this stigma that maybe diabetes could hold you back, or that was even a thing. So I think, again, I was lucky that the first thing that popped in my mind was, okay, nothing's going to change. It's going to be a big pain in the butt potentially, but, ultimately it's not going to hold me back.
And you mentioned you had asthma. Do you still have to deal with that? Or?
No, it was kind of like an exercise-induced asthma. I sort of grew out of it. My dad has asthma, and I think I don't know. It's at the time I was like using an inhaler occasionally, but no, luckily that's a non-issue at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
But you've mentioned that you had some great inspiration shortly after your diagnosis, because there have been other professional ball players with type 1.
Yeah, there have. Not too many, but, I think, and back then when I was diagnosed, it wasn't like you could just hop online and Google like type 1 diabetic baseball players. It was all kind of word of mouth. So I knew about Ron Santo, who's the Chicago Cubs great. And then I had a family friend at the time was a pitching coach for the Boston Red Sox, and he knew of Bill Gullickson, who was a longtime major league pitcher. And so when I was he had type 1 himself. And when I was about 12, a year and a half after being diagnosed, my family friend set up this sort of meeting on the field at Fenway Park when Bill was in town pitching for the Tigers, and I got to meet him. And, it was like a 2-minute conversation, but that really kind of went a long way. I knew he existed, but to really meet him face to face, it kind of gave me an extra bit of motivation.
And I think that's so important because, as you said, no one sat you down at diagnosis and said, well, son, your dreams of baseball are done. This is not going to happen for you. And a lot of kids in my son's generation don't worry about that either. They're not really told anymore this is going to hold you back. But being, kind of hearing that and then seeing and meeting somebody who's done that is a big difference. And is that one of the reasons I would assume that talking to Bill Gullickson really cemented it for you why you now talk to these kids.
No doubt. No doubt. I mean, I remember that moment, it was 22 years ago, 21, 22 years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. And I definitely impacts the way I go out of my way to meet other kids with type 1. So I think, that moment was so invigorating to me, and I'll never forget it. Part of the inspiration for the camp that I do and all the interaction I have with young type 1s.
Well, let's talk about the camp in a little bit, but I do want to focus on, the way you play baseball, that crazy first season in 2011, when you had all of those, the jumping and the diving and the YouTube videos. Was that fun for you? Was that a crazy year? Because I'd also like to talk to your mom. I'm worried about you getting hurt. I know that's so silly. What was that like?
Yeah, I can't speak for my mom. I think she was probably willing to deal with like the whiplash that I got on all those dives. I think she got a pretty good kick out of that whole run too. No, I loved it. It was an amazing part of my career in life. Really, it happened so quickly. I just come over to the Rays from the Cubs in a trade, and I had a little bit of big league time with the Cubs, but this was like my first opportunity to, first time making the team out of spring training, but even at that point on opening day, I was like essentially the last man on the team. I was like the fifth outfielder and didn't envision really playing a whole lot. I was just kind of thrilled to be on the team, and Manny Ramirez retired. And that kind of thrust me into like the starting role, and I just kind of ran with it. And the next few weeks were just like this crazy wild ride. And I guess I'm lucky I had the perspective, enough perspective to try to enjoy the moment. As crazy as it was, there were moments I was able to like sit back and just go, oh my gosh, life is crazy right now, but this is fun.
That's great. And as you listen, if you haven't heard about this, I will link up the Legend of Sam Fuld and some of the videos that came out of that season. A lot of fun. But tell me about your routine, if you could. I had a lot of questions from people who wanted to know, as a professional athlete, how do you do it with type 1 diabetes? How do you take care of yourself? If you don't mind getting a little personal here, to kind of share maybe a game day routine or how you take care of it all.
Sure. Well, I'm sort of an old school diabetic. I use my Lantus and Novolog pens, and I don't use a CGM nor a pump, obviously. And that's just worked for me. I've been using these pens the last 10 years or so, and I really I find that they work well for me. So I do my Lantus at night, once a night. I wish I could draw up like a typical game day for you. Unfortunately, like none of them are typical. Every day is different, and we play 7:00 games, we play 1:00 games, we play 3:00 games. We play in New York on East Coast time. We play in Oakland, obviously. We play, we're in different time zones throughout the year. So really, if there's a typical day, it's that I'm changing something. And, we're exposed to different foods in the clubhouse. We get fed really well in the clubhouse, but there aren't exactly nutritional labels on everything that we eat. It's a lot of like catered food that's brought in, and it's a lot of it is a guessing game. So that being said, I do try my best to, maintain some sort of routine and as best I can. So if it's a night game, which I'd say about 2 out of 3 games that we play are night games, I'll just try to have like oatmeal is like my go-to in the morning. I love oatmeal, maybe a little fruit in the morning, and then sort of snack as needed until lunchtime. And I love going to like a turkey sandwich with some fruit, maybe some vegetables and hummus, something like that, pregame, and then play at 7, and then we eat after. We have a crazy, whether you're diabetic or not, we are in a crazy schedule in that, your lunch is like 5:00 and your dinner is 11:00 at night.
My son would think that sounds fantastic. He could definitely eat dinner at lunch or dinner at 5 and then dinner or lunch again at 11.
Yeah. No, it's great until the next day you have to wake up at like 7 a.m. and play a 1:00 game, and then you're back to like normal life. So
do you just test a lot more? Do you check a lot more?
Yeah, I tend to. Whenever. Yeah, I think. I test a lot, regardless, but particularly during games and just during the season, I'm checking quite a bit. So a typical game, I'll probably check at least 3 times during the game. I think on average, I'm about 8 checks per day.
And this is totally nosy, so tell me to buzz off. Is the no pump thing a comfort thing, or is it also like you're diving and jumping and running around?
Yeah, I think it's a little of both. I experimented with one a couple years ago in an off season, and shoot, every kid I talk to loves them, and you hear nothing but great things about them. So I thought I'd give it a shot. I owed it to myself to try it, and I definitely found some benefit to it, but I also just didn't like that foreign body attached to me. And I was worried that if I were to wear one during a game, that it would become a bit of a hazard. So, yeah, and I think if I were struggling more with my treatment currently, I would be more compelled to change. But I just am really comfortable the way I handle it right now.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about, and this is kind of silly, but it's from my son's perspective. I wanted to ask you, during his baseball games, and he's 11 years old, we can see, because he wears a CGM, that when he's at bat, or when there's a big play, you can watch the adrenaline spike. Mm-hmm. It's pretty wild. And I'm curious if you have dealt with that kind of thing and how you deal with perhaps post-game highs that are adrenaline highs.
Yeah. Oh, it's really one of the bigger challenges. I mean, especially I've had a lot of games where, I won't start and I'll be on the bench, and all of a sudden in the 8th inning, I'm called upon to pinch hit. And so you go from kind of this very relaxed mindset, you try to anticipate these changes being made. So your adrenaline gets going around the 6th, 7th inning. You try to get your body loose in case you are called upon. But then you just can't predict that huge adrenaline spike and that blood sugar spike when you're called upon to pinch hit or even pinch run or whatever it may be. And so, I'll be right where I want to be in the low, mid 100s. And then I'll come back to the dugout like 20 minutes later, I'll be 300, and it's unbelievable. And you just can't. It's really tough to control. But you do the best you can, and it's one of those things that just in some ways it's difficult to combat. But I'd rather be a little on the high side than on the low side, obviously. So, and then after the games are crazy because then you get that letdown. You essentially I'll eat an entire meal, a big meal after a game, and not even need any Novolog, just because I've got all that adrenaline wearing off, and then you get those crashes and you need carbs just to keep you above board.
Yeah, it's been an interesting learning experience for us over the years of baseball as he's gone from little kid playing to bigger kid playing, and the different pressures and things. So he's like we're all walking science experiments to some extent. I see.
I know. It's just that there's a lot of data out there.
Yeah, you're
3 years of data,
and you're the scientist as well. So it's pretty crazy. Hey, let's talk about your camp. This is such a great program. This is the 4th year. You have a camp for kids who play sports, all different kinds of sports. And it's with one of the Tampa hospitals. Tell me about how this came about and what you like about it.
Well, so it came about my first year in Tampa. I just got an invitation to come check out the University of South Florida's new diabetes center. They just built the center, and they were kind enough to extend an invitation for me to just come check it out and meet the people associated with the center. So I did so, I think, on an off day that we had in Tampa, and met all the folks there. And over the last few years, I kind of had it in the back of my mind, this idea of holding a camp, a diabetes camp, a sports camp. Obviously was familiar with the diabetes camps out there, but I thought maybe making it unique to sports. Obviously, exercise goes such a long way in regulating type 1. So I thought this would be a cool idea. And so I brought up the idea with the USF folks, and they loved it. And so within months, we had this first annual Sam Fuld USF Diabetes Sports Camp. And it was wildly popular. It was like 100 kids at the first year we did it. And I went out and kind of went on the recruiting trail. And it was amazing. I was, using like Facebook and LinkedIn and you name it to find coaches, because I wanted all the coaches there to be type 1 athletes themselves. So that all the sports we offer are coached by type 1s themselves who have played at a pretty high level, college or even professional. So that part was really fun. I felt like I was recruiting my own little team, and that team has stayed together. I think we've expanded the number of sports we offer, and we have more and more coaches every year. But those that took part in the first year have stayed with us because they know how inspiring the whole weekend is.
So did you look for coaches that were familiar with type 1, or did you look for great people to take part and say, hey, we can teach you the type 1 stuff?
No, I wanted coaches that have type 1. So all of our coaches have type 1.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I'd say a couple that we have are parents of type 1s, but otherwise, I'd say out of the 15 to 20 coaches that we have, all but 2 or 3 are type 1s themselves. So, I mean, we have a basketball player who played overseas who's type 1. We have a great tennis pro, Jen King, she played in several U.S. Opens, and she's type 1. And Bill Gullickson, ironically, has come and helped me.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so we have an amazing, amazing staff, and we partner with the Florida Diabetes Camps, who've been around for a long time and hold camps throughout the state of Florida, and they've been a tremendous help too. So it's been a huge team effort, and it's just been really, really, it's one of my favorite weekends of the year, and we've grown. And I was worried that when I left Tampa to go to Oakland that my camp following would diminish, but it's actually increased. So I think this thing is here to stay.
It's a pretty unique program to have all of those coaches with type 1 and all of the different sports. Do you find that the kids are coming to maybe learn about their sport, but I would guess that there's a lot more going on than just how to take care of your adrenaline level afterward?
Yeah, it's everything. I think there's something empowering about just being around so many other type 1s, and then you combine that with just the amount of fun that you have playing the sports that you love. The kids get to choose their 3 favorite sports, and then they play those 3 sports all day. And so you have that amount of fun, and you share those stories with one another, and you learn from the coaches, and I think there's just like an intangible feeling you get by being around so many other diabetics. And that's one of my favorite parts of the camp, is just being around, learning from others, but just that feeling of comfort. You can't really can't put a price on that.
I have a few questions, if you don't mind, that I got from Facebook at Diabetes Connections, because people are always interested in just different ways that you've handled certain situations. So I'm going to throw a couple at you, but if these are not things you want to answer, just let me know. They're not crazy, but just let me know.
Okay, all right. I'm ready.
So Bill wanted to know, he said, I'm interested in how the college recruiting process was impacted by type 1 diabetes. Were coaches reluctant to recruit, or was it a non-factor? And I'll jump in and add that you played for Stanford. And to that question, then, do you disclose that you have diabetes when you're going out for scholarships? I mean, that's kind of an interesting issue. Yeah. So I'll let you answer the question.
Yeah, I was lucky enough. As far as I know, I don't think it was a concern. I mean, I don't know, the recruiting, the whole scene 15 years ago, or whenever it was when I was being recruited, was a little different than it was now. And by no means was I withholding any information. I was certainly open with my type 1, and as far as I know, it was a non-issue. It may have been, and I just didn't know about it. But I mean, Stanford recruited me, and as far as I know, they had zero experience with type 1 ball players. So, it wasn't like they had this great example of another type 1 player who was a perfectly great player with no issues. I was a new experience for them, but it didn't prevent them from recruiting me. So again, there was one instance where when I was at Stanford, and I met with a Baltimore Orioles scout, and this was my senior year in college. And for those of you who don't know, in college baseball, you're eligible to be drafted by a major league organization after your junior year. And so I was drafted by the Cubs after my junior year. I went back to school my senior year, but in talking with this Orioles scout, he was saying, yeah, we wanted to draft you last year, but we were worried about the diabetes. That kind of obviously threw me off a little bit. And that's kind of my one story of somebody like just outright telling me, yeah, we had some reservations because of your type 1. But otherwise, I am free of any crazy stories.
That's good. That's weird that he would tell you. Why not just shut your mouth?
I know. But I'm glad he did.
Yeah, well,
it gave me a little extra motivation.
Exactly. It does happen, obviously. And then the other questions, we had a bunch of questions about pumps, which we're not going to ask. But, mostly how do I keep it on my body when I'm sweating? And then how do you manage the delayed hypo reaction to exercising? And you mentioned you're usually eating and not treating. Is that what you usually do?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, sometimes it means I eat a big meal and don't even give myself any Novolog until a little bit later. It's kind of as needed. Yeah, I'll have like a big plate of pasta and not need a single unit of Novolog. So, I like anything, it's a matter of regular checks, and it's like I said, every day, every night is different. the amount of food, the amount of exercise, the stress level, everything there's always the variables change every day. So the way to combat that is to check as often as you can.
Well, we're talking to you before the camp. We're talking to you in the beginning of February here. And this podcast will air in a couple of weeks. And when it does, it'll be just about time, if not just past time, for pitchers and catchers to report. What are you looking forward to this season?
Well, I think I'm excited for, a bounce back year. I think individually and team wise, we had a down year. We had some expectations last year and we didn't meet them and we just couldn't seem to catch a break. So I'm looking forward to maybe catching a couple of breaks on the positive side and individually just looking to contribute and have a better year individually. And yeah, it's a good group of guys. And I think we're going to sneak up on some people. We definitely, we had a frustrating year last year, but I think we're going to we'll surprise some people this year.
Very cool. And let me just end by asking you, we started by talking about you at age 5 or 6, getting into baseball and being excited about it. What's it like when you now, on that first game of the season or maybe that first practice, when you walk on the field, is it still a little unreal or is this just another day at work?
No, there's still a feeling of, wow, this is my job. I get to go out and play baseball for a job. There are definitely moments during the year where that wears off, especially in years like last year. No, I think we try to remind each other, like, despite all the challenges that playing presents, the stress and the travel and the expectations, I think we do remind each other. We do a good job of saying, holy cow, we get to do this for a living. So I'll never, that first day getting to put on the uniform, be outside and even sign a few things like signing autographs and knowing that there are fans out there who are supporting you. It's a pretty cool moment despite this will be like my 13th year or 12th year in professional baseball. So it doesn't get old now.
Was there anything you wanted to mention either about camp or anything else that I missed?
Well, no, I think, the camp obviously is near and dear to my heart. And the other event that I've got going on now is I've partnered with a nonprofit called Slam Diabetes, who primarily hold wiffle ball tournaments as fundraisers for camps throughout the country. And so I partnered with them and we did 2 wiffle ball tournaments now in Tampa. And they're really cool. If you get a chance, check it out. It's slamt1d.org. And we do some really cool tournaments. They do a bunch up in New England and have now expanded down to Florida, partnering with me. And we raise money for my camp so that we can keep our camp tuition really low and add to the many features that the camp provides. It's a really cool thing. We, this last tournament we had in Tampa, we had 16 teams. Wow. So it's a big tournament. We raised up to right around $60,000. So it's a pretty cool event. We had about 20 big leaguers come out and play with us. And it's pretty fun to see a major leaguer. We had Josh Donaldson out, the MVP of the American League last year. He was striking out against the 12-year-old. So it's a pretty fun event. I definitely encourage you guys to check it out.
We will. Well, Sam Fuld, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
More information about Sam, the legend, the video at diabetes-connections.com, and of course, all about the camp as well. Quick note, it says on their website that the 2021 camp will be held virtually, and you never know what other celebrity T1D athletes will stop by. That's what it says on their website. So you can find out more at that link. I think this is fantastic. It's really too bad that everything's virtual right now, but it is a terrific way to connect. And as we've seen, listen, look on the bright side, you can connect with many more people who are available virtually who may not have been able to travel to the camp. So that's one way to look at it. Listening back to that interview just kind of made me nostalgic for the time when Benny played baseball. That was his big sport when he was younger, elementary school, and I think the first year into middle school, maybe into 7th grade, but I think 6th grade was his last year of baseball. I mean, diabetes-wise, I loved baseball. There was so much downtime. It was so easy to treat if he needed to. He got his Dexcom in 4th grade. I'll never forget. This was before Share. He had his receiver in, a case, and we would hang it from the wire. Is it called wiring? You know what I mean? It looks like netting, but the wiring at the dugout. And we would hang it on that with a clip. So I could walk over and check it. He didn't get Share till the end of 5th grade. So that was a different story and a different time. but the things you remember. And baseball was just a lot of fun. I mean, not even memories of diabetes, just all the good times and the great friends that he made and, still talks about and hangs out with to this day. Looking ahead, next week, I am working on an episode. This should be out next week. If not, it will be out shortly, about COVID vaccine type 1 advocacy. We've been talking about this in the Facebook group. It is different in every state, and many states are changing where they tier type 1. It's going up. It's coming sooner for many people in many places with the type 1, but not everywhere. So if you are curious about this, we're going to talk about how to find the information where you live. And if you're not happy about it, what you can do to advocate for yourself, for your family member, and find out what's going on behind the scenes in terms of advocacy. So I'm really excited to bring that to you, and that should be here next week. Thank you, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you're enjoying these classic episodes. I'm having so much fun bringing them to you. I'm Stacey Simms. I'll see you back here next week. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Simms Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.